let's start our discussion of linear systems with no solution by looking at an example. So here's a linear system here, and we want to see what happens when we try to solve it. The first step is to move it to an augmented matrix. So here's my augmented matrix. We know we need to get a 1 in the first row, first column, and we already have that. So let's get zeros below it. The second row has a 2, so we need to subtract 2. So we'll do -2 row 1 plus row 2. The first row won't change. We then have -2 times 1 is -2, plus 2 is 0. -2 times -3 is 6, minus 4 is 2. -1 times -2 is 2, plus 0 is 2. And then -5 times -2 is 10, minus 2 is 8. We then move to the third row. It currently has a 7, so we need to subtract 7. So we'll have -7 row 1 plus row 3. -7 times 1 is -7, plus 7 is 0. -7 times -3 is 21, minus 7 is 14. -7 times -1 is 7, plus 7 is 14. And then -7 minus 5, -7 times -5 is 35, minus 7 is 28. So we now have the first column the way we want it, and our next step is to get a 1 in this spot right here. So we'll multiply the second row by 1/2. We know the first and third rows will not change. And then we just divide the second row by 2. And that gives us 0, 1, 1, 4. Now that we have the 1 in the second column, we need zeros both above and below it. The first row is currently a -3, so we need to add 3. So we'll do 3 row 2 plus row 1. We know the second row won't change. So when we do the first row, we have 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 3 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 1 is 2. And then 3 times 4 is 12, minus 5 is 7. For the third row, we currently have a 14, so we need to subtract 14. So we'll do -14 row 2 plus row 3. -14 times 0 is 0, plus 0 is 0. -14 times 1 is -14, plus 14 is 0. -14 times 1 is 14, plus is -14, plus 14 is 0. And then -14 times 4 plus 28 is -28. Our next step is to get a 1 in this spot right here, but that's going to be impossible. We can't do any switching rows or it will mess up our pivots in our first column and second column, and there's nothing I can multiply 0 by and get 1. So this is a good indication that there's an issue. So if we try to actually write out this last row as an equation, if we try to move this to an equation, we get 0x1 plus 0x2 plus 0x3 is equal to -28. In other words, 0 is equal to -28, which is impossible. So this linear system has no solution because the last row essentially says 0 is equal to -28. And this is the general form of something with no solution. The idea being that somewhere in the matrix we get a row where everything to the left of that vertical bar is a 0, and to the right we have anything that's not 0. Let's look at another example. Here I have a non-square system, x1 minus x2 equal to 7, -2x1 minus x2 equal to 5, and 3x1 minus x2 equal to 9. So I have 3 equations and 2 variables. But solving these works the exact same way. So we start by putting this in a matrix. We then start with our row reducing. We need the first entry to be a 1, which it already is, so let's work on getting zeros below it. The second row has a 2, so we need to subtract 2. So we'll do -2 row 1 plus row 2. We know the first row will stay the same. So we then have negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, plus 2 is 0. Negative 1 times negative 2 is 2, minus 1 is 1. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14, plus 5 is negative 9. So we now need to move to the third row. It currently has a 3, so we need to subtract 3. And we'll use negative 3 row 1 plus row 3. So negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 3 is 0. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, minus 1 is 2. And then negative 3 times 7 is negative 21, plus 9 is negative 12. So now our first column is set. We need to get a 1 in the second row, second column, but that's already done for us, so we can start getting zeros above and below. For the first row, it's a negative 1, so I need to add 1. So I can just add the second and first rows. We know the second row won't change. We then have 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. And negative 9 plus 7 is negative 2. The third row currently has a 2, so I need to subtract 2. So we'll do negative 2 row 2 plus row 3. Negative 2 times 0 is 0, plus 0 is 0. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, plus 2 is 0. And negative 2 times negative 9 is 18. Minus 12 is 6. So my last row says that 0 is equal to 6, which is a big issue. So here we have no solution.